In this lecture, we'll continue on with film, video, and the digital arts, winding up all of the two-dimensional studio disciplines. So with film or cinematography, it's, motion pictures, movies, stuff we're all kind of pretty much familiar with, aware of, and all of that. So some things, obviously, motion pictures, they don't really move. You're seeing a series of images that give the illusion. You see the movement, you see all of that. Typically, it's between 16 to 24 still images per 1 second of movie. And slow motion is achieved by speeding up the amount of pictures basically that the movie camera would take. To speed things up, it'd go the opposite. So that's a little bit about it. So early cinematography came about because two men had a bet about a horse, and when a horse is in full gallop, one person saying that the horse, all four hooves would need to be on the ground at one time. The other person said no, they don't. So of course they made a bet. They hired a photographer, Muybridge, and one of the guys with the bets already had horses, so they borrowed a racetrack. Muybridge came out with all of his equipment. He had a series of cameras set up with tripwires and hung white blankets up opposite side of the track so that whenever the picture was taken, it would be nice, good, clear contrast. So you could clearly see the horse moving. And so basically, from this bet and this series of images where the horse went around the racetrack and everything was set up so that the horse would be running at a full gallop, setting off all the tripwires of the camera. And eventually they kind of got the idea that if you show these images in a certain way, then it would appear as if the horse was actually moving right in front of us. So zoetrope was kind of the first idea on how to make images appear to be moving, so that you would have a series of images changing, shown above there, and you would put that down inside the zoetrope. And basically our brain has this sort of natural shutter that takes place. So we have to recreate that shutter artificially. So as you can see on the zoetrope, there's kind of an open space you look in, and then a close, open, close, open, close, all the way around. So when you spin it, looking in a certain area, as all the little open areas come in front of your eyes, it would appear to move. So that's how they created these early images for moving pictures. So as time goes on, obviously, things become a little more advanced. So as photography is advancing, that slowly, carries over into the film and the new film industry. So Millet's Trip to the Moon from 1902, one of the first science fiction movies that there is. And then McKay's Gertie the Trained Dinosaur was one of the first animations. And so the early films, they were done pretty much kind of like a stage play that I'm sure we're all familiar with. You know, they would build a stage, set a camera up, everything would take place in stage, usually outside, so that there was plenty of light and everything. And then as far as the animation, you know, they figured, well, if we can do this with a series of photographs, what if we did a series of drawings? So animation coming, you know, not too terribly long after the, you know, invention of film. And of course, uh, with the trip to the moon, you know, that was an actual, you know, film using film stock projectors and all of that. By this time, there's electricity starting to be used to shine the light through the film, so you're projecting it on the screen. However, they don't have sound at this time, so there were silent films, and any type of dialogue would be displayed on the screen. And there were attempts to try to play, you know, kind of like a an LP record along with the film, but typically these were not electric, so you had to hand crank them. So if they weren't cranked enough to keep the speed up, then the sound and the images would get off. So that was not a real popular thing. So usually they had like a guy there playing piano to sort of, you know, create mood with the music to go along with what's up on the screen. So fast forward a little bit, Battleship Potemkin, directed by Sergei Einstein in 1925. It sort of claimed to fame. It was one of the first films that was edited pretty much how we're used to seeing films today. Uh, so what you had is, you know, directors that I like to kind of say, you know, they might be one trick pony. They figure out this one little trick to do with the camera, and you know, it's used in all their films. So where instead of just having the camera sitting right there on this stage, you know, someone comes up with the idea, what if we have two cameras in front of the stage? What if we have these mobile cameras that can move around? You know, what if we put one on a giant like boom crane or something, and we can, you know, move it up and down and pan all over the place, you know. And you know, eventually they quit using stages, and you know, they start using locations. So Sergei Einstein, you know, he's seeing all these movies made this way, and so he starts to take all these different ideas and combine them for his movie. So, like I said, he takes use of editing and puts his film together, you know, and it sort of resembles movies we have today. So, if you have not seen Battleship Potemkin and you're you know, just a big film buff and lover of film and all that stuff, you know, I highly recommend it. Uh, could be a bit of a word of warning. It is sort of pro communist. It takes place during the revolution, so it's pretty, you know, it's pretty much filled with a lot of propaganda and stuff. But at the same time, like I said, if you love film and all that, it's a wonderful film. And you know, to this day, there are certain scenes that are uh, almost duplicated. So again, a little more fast forwarding. So art and film. So more artistic ideas and stuff coming along. So Breathless from 1960 was one of the first films that's referred to as an auteur film. And an auteur film is basically, if you've seen those movies where it's the same writer, director, and producer, even sometimes acting in them. Warren Beatty is pretty well known for doing that, as well as some of the Robert Redford movies. So where they write everything, they do the producing, and a lot of times they do the directing. So it's like it's that their little baby. So that's the auteur films, and also this is where you start getting into independent films. So that films that are made away from a studio budget. And then on the right, Andy Warhol Empire from 1964. So Andy Warhol became interested in film. He was already doing, photography. It's calling almost what did Andy Warhol not get interested in doing? So his film Empire is basically a day in the life of the Empire State Building. So it's about 8.5 hours, pretty epic. And so it's probably a little more entertaining. You're probably thinking that's kind of boring sounding, like 8.5 hours of just the Empire State Building. But at least you probably have, some stuff flying around, some birds or what have you flying around there in the background or kind of in between camera and the Empire State Building. So there could be a little bit of excitement. It is probably much more exciting and a little bit more that could be going on than his other epic film, Sleep, which is over 9 hours of someone sleeping. So then getting into video, so again, it's sort of a continuation of the technology that we have. So our video is just much easier, a little more portable than messing with film. It can be easier to edit and things like that. So Bill Viola, I refer to him as kind of the Zen master godfather of contemporary video, where if you ever can get a chance to see one of his videos where he might have multiple screens and it's almost like there's this visual dialogue that starts going on back and forth between the screens. So there's kind of a whole lot that he'll bring to his pieces. Peter Campus, Three Transitions, 1973. It was kind of an early experiment with green screen technology. I think we're all kind of familiar with it. So it's basically him playing around with the camera, with these. There's one where he's like, wearing kind of well, you can see here, kind of this green shirt, and the still that we see here, he's rubbing like this green cream on his face. So if you just see the video, it's like he's almost kind of rearranging his face or something of that nature. And then the Shireen Nishat Fayez from 2008. So with the couple laying here, and it's kind of hard to make out from the smaller image, but there's all this text kind of going around them. And so in the video, it's this couple laying there, and all this text is being added to the image. And it's essentially about you know the artists and kind of her take on Islamic culture and what it's like growing up Islamic and what it means to be a female in Islamic countries. Then Tony Osler, Getaway #2. So it's more of this sculptural form that he's combining sculpture and the video together, where you can see this person's laying there with the mattress on their head. One of his other words similar to this one, I believe it's Getaway #1, where if you ever have a chance to kind of see it on display, it's kind of creepy in a way, because depending on where it's set up, when they had one set up at the DMA, you could hear someone screaming kind of for help. And then a few minutes later screaming, "Get away from me, don't touch me." And then set up in this loop, so after a few minutes, they start asking for help again, and then start screaming to get away from them. So again, it's kind of giving a little more presence to the video piece by combining elements of sculpture with it. And then of course that also carries over into digital art. So Keith Haring, kind of a early use of kind of like Photoshop, Illustrator, early digital imaging that's starting to take place. So again, it's just as technology advances, artists are there to play along and start to adapt and use it. And then the internet, Wolfgang Still, TV Tower, Berlin, 2001. So while today, the Still show would not really be kind of groundbreaking, today, but back in 2001, to where he set up this live 24 hours, 7 days a week stream of the TV tower in Berlin to a gallery in New York. So it was like the first time that you're able to stream this live video feed across the internet. So I said, artists just taking advantage of technology and all of that as it's changing and progressing. So getting a little bit of graphic design, kind of carrying over with some of the digital work here. So part of graphic design, it's presenting information, this visual way that we present information. And sometimes it's, presenting specific information. How do you convey information to people? Some of the tools here, signs, symbols, typography, layout, illustration, and again, digital. So how do you convey this information? What is the way that you present it? What is the way you present basic good information? Or, how do you create a magazine or book cover so that it stands out and really grabs someone's attention? So the three main things, actually, I guess in a way it's kind of five, but the big, changes with the printing press. So during the Renaissance, the printing press being introduced, and then the Industrial Revolution, so that you're mechanizing the printing press, and then travel, communication, and technology. So obviously, again, computers and all of that, so that you can, share and send all this information all over the place, and within seconds. Same thing with travel, being able to get there. Uh, so these are all, some of the things that have brought changes about to graphic design. So with signs and symbols, much like we talked about uh, of signs and symbols with iconography, these things have meaning, and what gives them meaning. So in this particular case, the yin and yang there on the left, coming from Taoism. Like I said, the part of the use of iconography and studying iconography and things like that. Um, it's preloaded content. We see this, we recognize it, we know what it is. Even though we're not necessarily all Taoists, we've probably been exposed and familiar with the yin and yang symbol. The opposites, the dualities, day, night, love, hate, good, bad, all that stuff. And the swastika next to it, obviously today, it's been ruined by certain events in history, whereas before it was used by a lot of cultures all over the world. It was sort of a sign of goodwill and prosperity and peace, and so it was something good. Uh, 1930s Germany, that all rolls around, and then this symbol just takes a nosedive. Um, so yeah, so cultures, times, events, things like that give these what you could say is, a couple of dots and a squiggly line, or these right angles. Cultures, events, and history, and things like that. That's what give these things meaning. So some other uses. So I know the Paul Rand logos are kind of worn out, but corporate logos, the whole iconography, instant recognition of these symbols. That's sort of kind of what it sort of boils down to. And then the opposite there on the left, the poster for the Department of Transportation. These Cook and Shinosky were given the task of how do you convey information to people that do not speak, uh, in this case, they do not speak one of the English or Spanish, the common languages in the U.S., mostly English, but anyways, so how do you speak to people that come here that do not know, either of the languages, or the languages that are spoken within the United States? How do you convey that information to people? Well, you do it, visually. So it's almost kind of the international symbols that have been developed to, convey this information. Where bathrooms are, where elevators are, uh, where to go catch a taxi, which way to go to a train, car rentals, where to get something to eat. All this information that is, on display at like airports and train stations, and other places where people are coming and going. And so typography When you get into fonts and how text is presented. So on the left, Albert Durr basically coming up with the idea of standardized type, a standardized typeface, or we're a little more familiar with, referring to them as fonts. So his idea on this, standardizing uh, the letters so that you could have, think of it, having a little more uniformity to the printing industry so that prints could printed in Germany, whereas he is from, you have a standardized type so that the same kind of book could be printed in Germany as well as, like, England or Italy, wherever else there's a print shop, they could be producing, the same type of material. So the Joan Dobkin leaflet for Amnesty International, she's using the text to sort of go along with part of what Amnesty International is about. And not familiar with the Amnesty International, they deal more with political prisoners. So here in the U.S., we have freedom of speech. Part of that would be you could openly be disgruntled about the government. So, which I think we're all seeing a lot of that. So people can, openly criticize or praise whatever, mainly in their case, mainly criticizing. We can criticize the president here, and for the most part, not much will happen. I mean, someone might not like you anymore, or whatever the case may be, but you would never be thrown in jail. Like in some countries, you speak up about the bad policies of the president, then you could find yourself locked up in a jail somewhere. So she's taken the text from some of the different prisoners that Amnesty International, they go and try to free these prisoners, bring sort of a fair justice to these people, because oftentimes they're thrown in jail, there's no trial or anything like that. So she's taken their stories, and the way she presents them, she's overlapping the text, and it's confusing and sort of hard to read. And so that's all part of their stories. They get kind of lost in this prison system, and it's sort of they're purposely lost in the prison system. It has disappear there, kind of in the middle where the letters actually disappear into the cover of the leaflet. And the "You Are Next," because some people have no idea when they might get thrown in prison. And they sometimes they don't even really know exactly what they said. So, Dobkin going along with what Amnesty International stands for and their stories to create the sort of the image that kind of works along with it. It's also with the typography and layout, how do you present this information to people? So on the left, it's times from New York to New Haven, Connecticut, and that's kind of hard to read. All this stuff sort of all over the place, not exactly the easiest thing to read. On the right, a much better format so that you can see departure times from New York and arrival times in New Haven. So it's just a much better way to present the information. It's not as confusing or jumbled looking. And then illustrations where words and images work together. So Toulouse-Lautrec, one of the posters he did for the Moulin Rouge, had he just had the text there, come down to the Moulin Rouge, have some fun. If it's just the text, do you really wonder, would it be that fun if I go there? So you kind of have this image of, the lady and the guy dancing there. So they're, dancing, they're having a good time. So yeah, maybe I do want to go there. So that the image and the text sort of work hand in hand, basically with the idea of selling you on wanting to go to the Moulin Rouge. Some other examples, John Mita's UCLA catalog, 2004. Student debt was never so colorful and wonderful looking. And then opposite that, the iPod silhouette. So the early iPod commercials, I like to joke, have a little moment of silence now that the iPod is obsolete. But the early ads, people, high contrast, black silhouette, someone dancing around with their iPod. They're having a lot of fun and they're enjoying their iPod. Life's great when you have an iPod. So they're dancing around that. You get to hear your music, freedom, and all this other stuff. That part of their selling. And then getting into motion and interactivity. So basically, interactive software. So these are some interesting sites. Cassidy Curtis Graffiti Archaeology, 2004 to present, although I don't think it's been updated as much like it used to be. But like archaeologists who dig through layers of dirt, Cassidy Curtis has gone, collected a series of images of these walls around the LA area. So on the left side of the screen, if you were to go there, you would see the different walls, different areas that he's documenting. And down at the bottom, there's like little tabs with dates on them so that you can see all the different types of graffiti and stuff that have been on the wall. And opposite that, the W. Bradford Paley text art, came up with this sort of new idea on how stories could be read. And how we would, learn to read stories. So this particular one is Alice in Wonderland. So on the outside, the white bands on the outside is the entire story of Alice in Wonderland, down like this little microscopic print. So it's like all the sentences. And in the middle of that are all the words. And so you have this orange line that kind of goes around from word to word in the different sentences, telling the story of Alice in Wonderland. And when it gets to, certain words that are used throughout the book, it like creates this pink sort of explosion pointing to other words that it's used with, in other sentences. So it's kind of an idea, new idea on the way to present classic literature. So the downside is going to look at this particular website actually doesn't work anymore. And not too long ago, that was kind of a concern in the art world where people are creating these websites and things like that. Technology changing, even JPEGs, that most common used type of image file, that's even changed since it was first sort of created and brought onto the scene. So with technology and everything changing, how do they preserve these website and images and pieces, using video and digital and things like that? How are they going to be preserved and kept for longevity? So that is it for the two-dimensional studios.